Welcome to Spotlight Documentaries and our series on stories of extraordinary leadership in maintaining the rule of law. We are honored to have with us today Attorney General Hector Balderas of the state of New Mexico. Thank you, General, for taking the time out of the holidays to discuss with us and the youth about the rule of law. Honorable Attorney General Hector Balderas, you are known for being an innovative leader in New Mexico, recognized for proactivity and finding solutions and responding to evolving needs by being nonpartisan and building strong partnerships with individuals, community organizations, businesses, government agencies, and other states, and with international offices. From your experiences, what are some of the obstacles we face today in maintaining the rule of law, and how can we overcome them?
It's a great question. I think the first two, there are many challenges, but the two that, critically come to mind, the first is that anytime that there is a decline or an attack on democracy or democratic culture, my opinion is that the rule of law suffers. And so you've seen attacks on institutional authority, you've seen attacks and a growing level of distrust among citizens about their government. And you've seen a real frustration, not only in young people, but across the spectrum. And so anytime there are ills like that, my belief is that the rule of law will suffer. Authority, compliance, civility, you'll tend to see a questioning of that very system or authority. And I'm not saying it's all bad. I mean, it's good to have reform. It's good to have challenges to institutions, but in the decline of democratic participation and a growing level of skepticism, I've seen a real challenge for both law enforcement and the judicial system to maintain that standard of integrity and trust and reliability that's so important in the rule of law. And the second, of course, for me is I believe that for many, many generations, yours, mine, there has been an underfunding of certain safety nets that help support the middle class and keep people well, healthy, and safe. And so anytime you have high addiction rates, you have a breakdown in families, I believe that's a secondary challenge. And I don't think that our nation has taken these problems and really funded them in the way we would fund other initiatives like putting a man on the moon or building our highway infrastructure system. I think the American family is really under strain and duress with so many societal ills, so that by the time they have interface with us or the legal system, for many, the challenges to their health or wellness or the family breakdown are much more a crisis situation rather than using the legal system for repair or remedies. And so those two areas for me seem very critical of why AGs need to build strong relationships with our young people. You're the next generation of leaders that I really believe are going to have to build our democratic institutions, and also making sure that the middle class and all families in this country feel that government really works for them, or else the rule of law will continue to decline.
I think those are some great points. And General Balderas, can you tell us what inspired you to become an attorney general and what your journey has been like, the ups and downs you faced?
Sure. I think for me, education, like so many immigrant families, was just a way to get a career, get a job, and get out of poverty. And initially, that is how I started my academic journey, really into adulthood, was just to try to get a degree, maybe get a job. And I come from a family that I was the first person to go to college, and I came from a family that had never been able to afford to buy their own home. So imagine the American dream for me was something of a distant challenge, very far away. And then it was, I believe, in my senior year of undergraduate work, two young law students from the University of New Mexico, both female, drove 2 hours to my little small college and they started doing law school prep examination trainings. Now, truth be told, the way they got me there is that on the flyer they put free pizza. And I thought, wow, I'll come hear these two ladies out and see what they were doing. Well, they weren't ladies, they were young students who were taking initiative like you and realizing they needed more minorities in the legal profession. And more importantly, in my little small college, we had not had one person attend our law school in New Mexico in 10 years. So they were recruiting, they were trying to make a difference and a positive change. That is where I got the idea that I could actually go to law school, and they became somewhat casual mentors for me. And yet they were just graduate students. They were only 4 or 5 years older than me at the time. I was a broke college student. And they were really trying to inspire me to have that vision that I could actually become an attorney, or more importantly, that I could make a difference in my community. So that's that little transition there, free pizza and advocacy, was really what got me on the track and first gave me the idea to become an attorney.
It's a truly inspirational story. And how would you define the rule of law and the role of the Attorney General so that teens can understand it?
Sure. You know, every community, wherever our young people are from, neighborhoods, whatever family, we have to operate under a set of ethics and a set of laws, maybe more importantly, like guidelines. And sometimes your first rule of law might be your parents, and you have to abide by a set of really standards to decide how you're going to do the laundry and feed yourself and do your chores. But you're already contributing as a member of that family. Well, the rule of law works much in the same way. Our government of the people pass laws that we will operate under a set of norms and standards and behaviors. And it's also grounded in our ethical foundations in terms of what our values are. And so it's just a framework. I would use the analogy that it's much like how you get from your house to your school. You have to operate under a set of speed limits, speed bumps, traffic lights. The rule of law is really just a framework in how we are going to make those decisions, and also how we're going to solve conflicts or harms that are committed against families. There's remedies built into our way of law and our rule of law.
And what can we, the people, do to help the Attorney General's office?
Well, the Attorney General is a fascinating position because I'm independently elected. All attorney generals across the country gain power different ways. Some are appointed. I was elected by the people of New Mexico, and my job is to be the chief law enforcement officer and enforce the rule of law in my state. And that can be local, state laws. And I can also partner with federal agencies to help assist in the enforcement of federal law. It's a mysterious position because really I'm supposed to be just the people's lawyer, but we do so much more. We are on the front line of everything that goes good or bad in our society. And I like to also reference us as the fourth branch of government. Many times as you're learning in your school and through your history and political science classes, there are usually three branches of government. But the Attorney General operates as kind of a tool or a shield in all three of those branches. So sometimes we're in a court of law with the judiciary. Sometimes we are interpreting laws that the legislature passes, or sometimes we're friend of the governor, or we have to be a check on the governor of each state in the country. So I think sometimes we're the forgotten fourth branch of government informally that really is the voice of the people. And attorneys generals are only as good as the people that they serve. In other words, the agenda that we carry out. If I'm close to my community and I take my orders from the people, it's more than likely that I'm going to be more effective as an attorney general because I will have the will of the people and utilize those powers in a way that protect all families in our respective states.
It's truly helpful. And your leadership helped achieve unprecedented victories for New Mexicans in civil courts by securing the largest tobacco settlement payment in state history. And you are also aggressively litigating against the opioid industry and made New Mexico the first state to sue opioid distributors. Thank you for fighting such an important issue. So
Sure.
how do you in your office pick the cases you want to pursue?
You know, I live in a small state. We only have 2 million people, but one of the advantages of a small state is a lot of my cases and the ideas for these cases come from what I call coffee shop conversations. A lot of times I'm out in the community and it's the citizens and families that will give me these ideas because a lot of times they're facing the harms directly on the front lines. And so, um, for instance, I recently had to sue some technology companies that were not protecting the information and privacy of minors, of young people that use computers and phones. And really, it was concerned families and advocacy groups that really raised this as a concern. And then we investigated and realized that indeed that technology companies can do a better job in complying with federal law to protect all of your private information and confidential information, even stuff like location. So let's say you and I are on this call right now. We don't want technology companies to take your location, your algorithm, and then just randomly monetize it without your permission, especially without your parents' permission. So a lot of my casework comes from those conversations with families. The second area is I'm very aggressive in litigating criminal cases. So a lot of times I'll step in for district attorneys or other prosecutors in certain small communities that don't have the resources. And a lot of times it's the same approach. There will be an impacted family who is harmed by abuse or some type of exploitation. And then our office will investigate and really vigorously litigate on behalf of families.
And General Balderas, you also expanded New Mexico Internet Crimes Against Children task force, which you just mentioned, which is a huge effort in saving the lives of children. With your strong background in technology, how can we leverage emerging technologies such as machine learning and artificial intelligence to help fight internet crime more efficiently and collaborate across states and countries to build a safer internet?
It's a great question. You know, I think there's going to be two leverage points. So let me give you kind of the challenges first, and then I'll give you the opportunities. The first challenge is that when Congress allowed the internet to flourish and the business community began to grow the internet and information superhighway, they really did it in a way that was unregulated and didn't think about some of the negative impacts that technology could have. Or we've had so many good things come out of the internet for some people like yourself and your generation, but we haven't really planned for a lot of the negative impacts that could occur. So the two opportunity areas, number one is that you all have a lot of power as consumers. And so we shouldn't just be individuals who use these spaces, but if the next generation can really embrace themselves as consumers and demand change, demand better corporate stewardship, better practices, more privacy, I think some of the companies themselves will have to change to cater to your demands. In other words, you say, I will only do business one way, but I expect these values to be upheld. You have a lot of power as consumers. So I do think competition and consumers becoming more savvy and more literate will really positively improve this area. And then secondly, I have had to use a big stick, and the threat of investigating and litigating against companies has companies listening. And I do think companies will hopefully improve their practices much the way the automobile industry has. For instance, before you were born, even before I was a young adult, the automobiles in this country didn't even have seat belts. If you can imagine that, they didn't have seat belts, they didn't have GPS, they didn't have the safety equipment that you all have and enjoy in using transportation today. So that industry had to undergo dramatic reforms, and now automobiles are using smart technology. Like you said, they're going to be using artificial intelligence soon. So my hope is that the internet, we can never police our way into protecting every family, but that the internet and technology companies will undergo some of the revolutionary changes towards safety and privacy, and to make sure that they put the consumer first and not the profits. And that's going to be a challenge, but I don't think Congress is going to somehow deploy the internet police or create enough protections. They're too far behind the 8 ball. These reforms are going to have to come through consumers and through the next generation of entrepreneurs.
That's truly wise. And as one of the key leaders in maintaining the rule of law, can you share with us an accomplishment that you feel personally most proud of?
Yes, it's so important, we as AGs, to be very up to date on the law. It's important for us to be courageous and be willing to get into the legal fights for families. But really, to be an effective AG, I believe you have to really be able to walk in the path of common people, the people that put you in office. Sometimes politicians would get power hungry, and they lose their way in terms of why they initially sought public service. And the thing I'm the most proud about is a lot of my cases, I am personally connected to the families that I serve. In other words, I don't just get into the file, the legal file. I go beyond the legal file and I meet the families. I set a strategy with the families. I include families, because I want families to know that not only do I work for them, but when we walk into a courthouse, I want you and any of the impacted families to, when they walk into the courthouse with me, I want you to feel like you own the courthouse. And that's a unique perspective that I think comes from my upbringing. I was raised in poverty. I was never expected to go to law school. I wasn't law school material. My dad wasn't a judge. And so I wasn't recruited. I believe really my ability to walk and relate to people, everyday people, makes me a better attorney general. And in one case in particular, there was a family whose daughter experienced a brutal rape by some individuals that she knew. And this wasn't a normal type of abuse case. They hurt her so bad that she was about to die about 4 or 5 in the morning after a night of some awful acts were going on. But one of the guys panicked and initially called somebody on her cell phone, and then they hung up. They just said, your daughter's here at this location, and she was bleeding and unconscious and left to die. Her father made it out there somehow, and they got her to the hospital, and she had to go through numerous surgeries. The tragedy is that the law enforcement department that was involved and the district attorney at the time never built a strong case. They just didn't do the right work. And there was this young lady who, for about 3 years, had to not only deal with the victimization of the rape and the brutal violence, but she was then re-traumatized and re-victimized by a justice system that wasn't accountable and didn't want to help her seek justice. So, Raj, I had to do a lot of odd jobs to get through law school and undergrad, and not legal jobs. I'm talking about like washing cars to get some extra money. So years later, when I became an attorney general and I was a practicing attorney, there was the family was frustrated, and they were talking to some individual, and they said, well, we know this Hector guy. I don't know what he exactly does, but he has a very powerful position. Maybe he's our last chance so your daughter will get some justice. Well, the reason he knew me is because I used to be what they call a lot boy. I washed the cars on the lots and I made sure they were clean. But he remembered me 20 years later, and also had the confidence in me to say, look, he'll give us a meeting, he'll talk to us, he'll tell us what we need to do. So the family walks in with the family friend, and they acknowledge, they said, we don't know what kind of cases you do, we don't even know what the attorney general does. And I said, you came to the right place. These are the cases that I look for. I live to prosecute these type of cases. But it was really my connection to the community, and it was an odd job. And really, so my message to young people is, no matter where you come from, always value people and value the relationships and the mentoring that come along. Because 20 years later, this guy had enough faith in me that he knew that, because I worked for him, that at least I would have an open heart to look at that case. Now, what we ended up doing is we ended up convicting that individual of over 35 years. We won the case at trial, and I'm very close with that family. But I'm the most proud of that case, Raj, because they remembered me as a lot boy and not an attorney general. They remembered me as a kid who was just washing cars, but who would probably want to do the right thing for that young lady. And that's what keeps me connected when I hear stories like that.
That's truly remarkable. And you're known as a champion for children's online privacy protection, and by not only settling with Google over allegations of violations of Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, but also further enabling Google to create the Kids Initiative, which provides school administrators with tools to assist students with protecting their personal information and to actively police app developers so they do not collect information from children under the age of 13 without parental consent. Which you mentioned before, and recently joined a nationwide effort to investigate how Instagram impacts young people, particularly their mental health. For our part, what can children and youth do to be more aware and proactive?
Well, the first is going to be a little uncomfortable because I'm a parent, and I know of kids that grew up with technology their whole life. You all think very differently than we as parents, but it's okay to have a conversation with your parents about technology. A lot of times your parents are not up to date in terms of what your rights are when we use these systems. And so these systems are in our home every day. And the worst thing that can happen is that the young people and the adults in the home don't have a strategy for how they want to use technology. And I lacked the same conversation. Here I am, the attorney general, and my daughter would be on all these apps, and I didn't really have a good understanding of where she was going within these systems and these apps. I know every day when she's going to the store, I know where she goes to school. She drives now. I kind of have a good idea of what town she's in on a daily basis, yet I didn't know how she was using technology in our own home. And so just a conversation. It doesn't have to be a father-son conversation. It can just be a cool conversation about how do we want to strategically use technology so that technology doesn't use our family or doesn't create any risks to you and your family. So the conversation would be very helpful. Secondly, there are responsibilities and disclosures that are owed to you and to your parents. So figuring just a what I call a basic toolbox, or it can be very simple, but just undertake that conversation because knowledge is power in this system. And a lot of times bad things will happen, fraud on the internet or exploitation. And don't wait for the crisis till you figure out that you don't have a plan. It's always important. Just like we have hopefully a fire safety plan in our home, we should have a technology plan. So those two simple things can really save you a lot of money from being scammed in fraudulent activities, or they can save you all a lot of stress. But we have to have a conversation about technology. We can't take it for granted.
What is one of the toughest decisions you've made as Attorney General, and how did you navigate that struggle?
Sometimes I have to decide not to prosecute. Sometimes the toughest decisions are not the cases that we choose to go forward with. Sometimes you have to turn down a case because we don't have enough evidence. And it's heartbreaking. A lot of these families sometimes will just want us to go forward. And I ethically cannot bring cases that I lack enough evidence. And if I lack enough evidence, then it's not ethical to bring these cases. So for me, the hardest cases are when I can't help families. And I've had several of those where a loved one will be lost to gun violence. And sometimes we just won't have enough evidence to be successful in a court of law. We never give up. We then try to direct the family to other remedies where we become advocates to change laws and pass more protections. But a lot of times it's very heartbreaking when you can't tell a family that we're about to charge, that we can't charge somebody.
And while working with high profile cases, do you receive pressure? And if so, how do you handle that?
Yeah, a lot has changed. We get a lot of pressure with social media. And as I was saying earlier, the country in general is more skeptical and cynical. And so I probably have to do my job in a much tougher environment. I don't let it bother me. I draw strength from families in our state. Many times these families are dealing with many more problems that are more harsh than just public scrutiny. But it has gotten worse for elected officials. And I'm also worried that too many young people are now bypassing public service because they say it's not worth it. You can make more money, have more privacy in going to other careers and professions. But we need some of our best and brightest students to consider public service, at least for part of their career. Because I'm already getting to the age where I'm getting ready to pass the torch to maybe your generation. But we need more women, we need more minorities, we need people with diverse backgrounds to consider public service. And really that's what also inspires me to stay active to the community.
And General Balderas, you talk about the opportunity you got as a university student to spend time with judges in your community. What are the opportunities for high school students in New Mexico to be involved and learn more about the Attorney General's office and role?
We've created a program where we bring in, I do hire every occasion, I hire some college students and I hire some high school students, not just so you can have an internship experience, but the reward for me is that I think you're already born leaders. And so I will partner with high school students and allow them to work with my investigators, my lawyers. But I'll always set a project goal that they have in their community. Like I've had a couple of high school students work on improving our technology at our office, or on the opiate crisis, on addiction for young people. They're partnering with my lawyers. And then at the end of the program, they give a presentation to their peers, their teachers, their parents. And so it's a rewarding project and experience for both my office and the professionals that work for me, but also our young people. But we don't treat you like a student. We already believe that you are a leader that is going to make a difference in the future, and that you derive and will build the solutions that we need in the future.
And speaking of the future, what do you think about the future of law, both in terms of career and in terms of implementation of law 10 years from now?
I do think it's vibrant. Our society will always need lawyers. Our economy is going to need lawyers. But my message is that we need good lawyers. We need diverse lawyers. We need lawyers that have different societal backgrounds. And so I'm bullish on the notion that the rule of law will continue to make our country great. It will be as common as entrepreneurialism or the American dream or apple pie or sports in our country. It's part of the fabric that makes us a strong nation. That does not mean that it doesn't have problems. That does not mean that it doesn't need to reform itself. It needs to modernize with our people, and we need to grow and change with our communities, because our communities are changing very, very fast. But whether it's doing business in our community, you need the law. Whether it is keeping our community safe, you need the law. But I want young people like yourself to look at the law as also a way to improve our community and to make our community both healthier and more wealthy, not just in money, but in terms of stability and predictability. The rule of law should be something that I think we value, but I do think it'll be part of our success as a country. We will either succeed or fail in our country if we don't, if we fail or succeed in making the rule of law part of our common society.
And an estimated of 34 million people in the US have no access to any legal services. How can we help them?
A lot of times there are some services, but because in this information age, you're getting bombarded every day with different information and sales ads and commercials and video games. And so as young leaders, youth leaders, I think you can be very powerful force in getting the word out. There are some legal resources. And so a lot of times those services are underutilized by our communities because we don't know they exist. So young people are the best form of communication. You're the smartest, you're the most innovative, you're the most up to date. But that could be one solution. And then secondly, we do need more increased resources, because I think that the demand is going to continue to grow. There will be more and more families that don't have access to a lawyer or can't afford a lawyer, and that should be a big concern. So I think the more young people can ask for more investment in legal services, that will bode well. And then also young people serving as like surrogates and connectors to families. There's a good program in New Mexico, which I helped sponsor, where a company donated a lot of laptops, and they put them at the senior citizen centers. But it was young people, because I am not that technology driven myself. But people like your age would go to the senior citizen centers and teach them how to use the computers, teach them not how to be victims of fraud and protect themselves. But these young people would drive these senior citizens to certain resources that they need, not just legal, but other services. So it's a very successful program. The young people go into the senior citizen center and they help these elderly individuals, but they were connecting them to technology, but more importantly, they were using technology to connect to other services that people need. You probably know, elderly people struggle just to use a cell phone, and yet your generation is whizzing through technology. But really connecting those kind of opportunities really has been a successful program in Albuquerque.
That's a very helpful suggestion. And what is your message and advice for teens and youth that aspire to pursue a career in law and or become a future attorney general?
For me, the classes, getting a job to buy a nice car, the titles, the powers that come with this role are all part of my responsibility and my job duties. But my advice to young people is to find your why. Find what motivates you to make a difference. Find your passion, because ultimately that's what's going to drive what kind of attorney you are and how successful you are, and whether or not you're really able to build trust in the community. Being a good lawyer is all about public service. And I believe that, academically, I wasn't the strongest student. I didn't have the culture where my family had been raising me to go to law school. But I think what got me through law school and was helped me become successful is really that I always knew I had a passion to try to make a difference, a big difference, and not just in my neighborhood, but I wanted to use the law degree that I was earning to provide for my family, but also to help other families. So my advice is to find your why and your passion. And this advice goes to people not just in the practice of law, but in any type of career you're going to pursue. You should know before you walk in the doors that you're valuable and that you're worthy of a dream, and that also you should not be shy about why you want to pursue your passions. A lot of times when I was raised in poverty, I didn't know my own story. And a lot of times I was afraid to speak up. And as I got out of my shell, I then realized it's because I knew that I had a purpose and what I was going to do with my degree. And really, that's been very helpful in me becoming Attorney General.
Yeah, that's a wonderful message. General Balderas, thank you so much for your leadership and taking the time to answer all my questions. Have a great day and a fantastic new year.
Thanks, Raj.